is the best in the world at engineering.
Well, from the locomotive to the jet engine, the light bulb to the television, we Brits invented so many of the things which make up the modern world. In this series, a number of leading eggheads have steered me towards their favourite bits of British engineering. But which ones best reflect our national flair for nuts and bolts? Today it's the turn of land transport. Now look at this sexy beast we've blagged from Land Rover. It reminds me of an old girlfriend of mine. A bit hefty and the ride can be bumpy, but she handles well off-road and is very good in mud.
Still, it's boring, predictable, but it's reliable.
We start though not with a Land Rover, but with a car which was once by general consensus the best in the world. It looks like someone's taken the British Museum and stuck a hearse on the back. It's the most celebrated radiator grille in automotive history, and the car itself is a rolling definition of excellence. The carriages of kings, queens and maharajas. The Rolls-Royce. In 1904, Charles Rolls, a millionaire playboy who peddled French cars to his aristo chums, met Henry Royce, a Manchester engineer whose French car kept breaking down. Two men with but a single thought, showing the frogs how to build a proper car. 2 years later, they unveiled the Rolls-Royce Silver Ghost.
Why is this car known as the best car in the world? Well, in 1907, Claude Johnson, the rather canny managing director of Rolls-Royce, devised a publicity stunt to show her off. Johnson offered to run the car for 15,000 miles with a gentleman of the press on board. The Silver Ghost swept majestically back and forth between London and Glasgow 39 times, making only one stop of 36 seconds to fix a petrol cap. After the journey, the car was taken to bits and inspected. It was found to be almost completely free of wear and tear.
The press proclaimed the car the best in the world, which is a good job because it cost an absolute fortune. A Silver Ghost set you back £3,500, which in today's money is a staggering squillion quid. So what did you get for your money? Strange as it may seem, all Rolls-Royce provided was a big engine sitting on a chassis. You had to build the bodywork at your own expense. To do this, you went to a coach builder who would design something wonderful specially for you and build it by hand, which is why none of the early rollers look quite the same. The work of the coach builders was as breathtaking as the engineering, and you could even have the bird on the front with a nightie on or naked. Personally, I think she looks absolutely smashing in the Altogether, though it is tricky keeping your eyes on the road. It's a testimony to the excellence of the car and to the love it inspires that a century after it was produced, nearly half the 8,416 Silver Ghosts ever made are still going strong. They're kept on the road by enthusiasts like Andy Courtney, who has foolishly agreed to let me drive his £250,000 baby.
There we are, what a skillful bit of driving.
Oh!
And there we have it.
It's a beautiful thing.
Rolls-Royce Silver Ghost.
It must be nerve-wracking backing it out that very narrow space though.
I've done it a few times now, I'm getting better.
Yeah. Of course, Rolls-Royce, what do you think it's all about the engine, isn't it?
It is.
So are we going to have a look at underneath the bonnet?
I haven't cleaned it lately. So it's not.
You haven't cleaned it lately? Well,
no, I know it's been in the garage and the winter's been here. But there we have it. It's a 7.5 litre engine, 6 cylinders. Peak revs are about 1500, so it's not a fast engine, it's a very slow moving engine, which gave it its longevity. That's how it's lasted for all these years, because the pistons are going up and down gracefully rather than the modern car where they're knocking themselves to pieces.
Can I sit in the car? Can I sit behind the wheel?
Of course you can. Do you have clean hands? Get in and sit. You always get in this side. It's not normal to get in the other side because there's gear sticks and gear knobs and the
And there
handbrakes
are,
and everything else
yeah.
in the way. Now pump up on the hand pump until you're registering £1 on the fuel pressure gauge. Tremendous wrist action there. It's doing very well.
Is this doing something, or is this just a joke?
No,
at my
it's
expense?
starting to move. Once the engine's running, it's got its own mechanical pump that keeps up the pressure. But
I'm just
that's
wondering
fine.
what this looks like from behind.
I know, but don't worry about it. Handbrake on, and you should be in neutral. Now, if you turn the knob on the centre, that knob,
Yeah, this one.
twist it round. The first switch is B, which is
B.
battery, which is the coil.
Right.
The next switch is magneto and battery, which is both ignition systems.
Right.
And switch the top lever, which is the fuel strength, to the right, which is strong. There is a starter on the bulkhead. Now that's the clutch. No, to the left and up a bit.
Left and up a bit.
Switch the right-hand lever, the ignition lever, this one, on the steering wheel. Put that right up to the top. Set the fuel mixture with weak and strong.
This is very complicated.
It is. It gets worse. Wait, you have to try and change gear.
I'm not going to change gear. I'm going to sit here all day.
Put that to there. And you're in business. You're in business.
You know what happens now, don't you?
Well, I go in and have my dinner and you go for a
No,
drive.
I say, chauffeur.
Chauffeur.
Andy wisely decides to get us onto the open road before letting the Sunday driver behind the wheel. But just as I'm feeling I'll never be able to do as well as a petrol-head demigod like Andy, I discover that he is only a man with feet of clay.
Are we having a gear moment?
We're having a gear moment.
Changing gears
Talk
on the
amongst
Rolls Royce.
yourselves.
Well, I can't think of anything I'd rather be doing.
Cars have come a long way since this thing was built. For a few grand these days, you can pick up a motor which would have amazed Henry Royce. And yet, in a vintage roller, you feel so much more aware of, so much closer to the actual engineering. It reminds you what an amazing, liberating invention the car was, and how thrilling it must have been to ride on top of the most advanced bit of engineering in the world. At last, it's my turn.
Handbrake off.
You're the famous motor racing driver, aren't you? You're not just some comedian.
It's
wait till that
moving.
car goes. Your knuckles have gone quite wide. Nice positive movement.
Right,
Got the
clutch.
Oh, wonderful.
Not bad.
Wonderful. That's it. That's the gear change going.
We can do it. I used to fly these crates in the war. Some more vehicles coming towards us, Mr. Corney. What do I do?
Just confront them. Look them in the eye. Look them in the eye and
then
carry on
shoot.
straight.
After about £6,000 worth of bumping and grinding, I quickly get the feel of the Silver Ghost, and Andy and I tootle off like a couple of hoorays on the way to a pheasant shoot. But we're not tootling to shoot pheasants, we're tootling for a spooky convention of silver ghosts. At key points in the year, they come from far and wide, like randy elephant seals, to honk their horns and generally show off to one another.
Come on, lads.
This is wonderful.
Yeah, that's right.
Is this what being a Rolls-Royce owner is about? I mean, Rolls-Royce is about class, about being a bit special. Is this what it's about, champagne and strawberries?
They are the icon of British engineering. Rolls-Royce was the top of the line. Rolls-Royce means everything. It's gone into the language as a superlative. Everything is compared with a Rolls-Royce.
If you know nothing about cars at all, and one of those comes up, you think, this is something, I'm now looking at something special.
How many cars have you driven and had photographs taken of you as you drive
Every
down
time
the
I go
road?
through a speed camera.
So well made, using absolutely incredible
Where
motor.
Henry Royce wanted 2 bolts, he put 3 or 4 or 5. Where he wanted an 8 thick metal, he put 3/8 thick. Everything was over-engineered. The bearings were larger and stronger than they wanted. He simply took every component and made them as good as was possible.
And how
So-
appropriate that we're sitting here listening to some Rolls-Royce engines
Probably Rolls-Royce
going
engine
over
going
on a
What a shame
747.
Henry Royce isn't round to realise what standards he set.
I know exactly.
because
Henry Royce beers, and what the hell is that noise? The British Rolls-Royce was slow and grand, but what about a car that's fast and sexy? The Yanks had the Mustang and Steve McQueen in a pair of Ray-Bans. We had the Triumph Herald and Leslie Phillips in a cravat. But one car was to change all that. the first internationally celebrated British roadster, sex on 4 wheels, the car James Bond should have driven, the E-Type Jaguar. The Italians, of course, have their fancy Ferraris and Lamborghinis, but it was the sexy British E-Type that became the most lusted-after sports car in the world when it was unveiled at the Geneva Motor Show in 1961.
I'm about to meet the car that was the star of the Geneva Motor Show. The most photographed, the most glamorous, the most talked about E-Type Jaguar ever built, the 9600 HP. Here it is. If that's not easy on the eye, I don't know what is. It's now owned by Philip Porter, the founder of the E-Type Jaguar Club. Hi, Philip.
Hello.
What a beautiful car.
Thank you.
It is. It's just perfect, isn't it? It says E-Type Jaguar to me.
They are a stunning shape.
A stunning shape. And how long have you had this one?
About 25 years.
Now, what makes this car so special in your opinion?
It's a combination of things, of course. It's an absolutely stunning shape. I mean, it's a pure sculpture. Tremendous performance as well. Incredible acceleration, tremendous flexibility. So it's a wonderful combination of serious performance, even today, and good looks.
And when at the time it came out, it must have been special. I mean, the general public had not seen anything like this, I presume.
Absolutely sensational. It stopped people in the street. It was mobbed.
Now, if you have even a passing acquaintance with the Roman alphabet, you will have guessed that the E-Type evolved from another Jaguar car called the D-Type. The D-Type was a fully fledged racing car, a beautiful machine that bombed around racetracks in the 1950s looking like a jet plane on wheels. It looked like that because it was built by an aircraft designer, Malcolm Sayer, and a race car engineer, William Haynes. The D-Type was such a wow on the racetrack, Jaguar wondered whether they couldn't cash in and build a version for general consumption. The result is one of the most aerodynamic roadsters in the world. But the E-Type was designed before the age of fancy pants wind tunnels, so how did they do it?
They tested those days rather crudely. They actually put tufts of wool all over the car, little strands of wool stuck here, here, etc. Then somebody would follow in another car watching the behaviour of the tufts, and if they were behaving in an irregular pattern, there was a problem there, it needed some alteration, so that was the sort of way it was done.
The E-Type was a state-of-the-art road sports car. It had independent rear suspension, whatever that is, 4-wheel disc brakes, which was handy if you wanted to stop, and a 3.8-litre twin overhead cam engine, which I'm told is just what you need to travel at more than twice the legal speed limit.
It's very clean.
Not clean by some people's standards, I have to say, because I believe in using
That's
cars.
the cleanest engine I've ever seen, ever, in any car.
I think you're exaggerating.
So what makes this different from the ordinary engines of the time?
Well, it's a twin overhead cam engine.
It's a twin overhead cam engine. Make a note of that.
But the amazing thing about Jaguar engines, and this engine in particular, is that they had flexibility, not just outright performance. Had a lot of torque, in other words, it could pull well without having to use the gears all the time.
I don't know whether it's Philip's Jackie Stewart sideburns or the red puffer jacket tank top, but I'm finding it hard to absorb all the tech spec
They
stuff.
decided the key was not quite in keeping with the...
So to make it more digestible, I'm turning to our delightful series engineer Claire, who for some reason is furtively lurking in a disused railway siding.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Claire, but this is not an E-Type Jaguar.
I know, it just hasn't got the bodywork, has it?
No.
But we're going to use this to explain about the overhead twin cam engine, which is what the
You
E-Type...
petrol head, you petrol head bird.
I know. But back to internal combustion.
Yeah.
There's the 4 processes, isn't there, where you
Suck.
bring all the air and the fuel into the actual engine, squeeze,
Compress it.
and then ignite it, make it go
goes bang,
bang.
push the piston down, and that does all sorts of geary things.
It provides the power, and then you've got to get rid of all the exhaust and set the cycle to go again. The E-Type Jag is the first one to have 2 valves.
Two valves?
It just speeds the whole process out. It gets all the burnt fuel out quicker and lets the whole cycle start
see.
again. So I'm going to jump off this thing in a minute, and I'm going to time you pushing it.
So what you're saying is,
track.
I am a valve.
You are a valve.
I am a valve. At the end of the track,
Making a
this does
difference.
finish in Paddington, you realise, this
All
track.
right, okay, maybe just the white disc at the end then.
Okay.
3, 2, 1, go! Seconds. Right, that was 35 35 seconds, Rory, with two of us, two valves, twice as fast, yeah?
So that's
Ready?
17.5 seconds.
Ready? 3, 2, 1, go!
Okay, Zoe, tell us it was less than 35.
21 seconds.
Yes!
That's not bad.
Right, it
It's a
should
bit
be
slow, it should
17 and a
less
half,
than
shouldn't it?
that,
So that's
yeah.
not too bad.
I don't think you were putting as much effort in as you should have done.
Excuse me, Miss Reverse. It's harder than it looks, isn't it?
Yes, it is. But that's a significant increase in power
Indeed.
to our engine.
Yeah, well valved.
Do another go?
No.
To find out just how well this E-Type twin overhead cam thingy performs, I've been invited to Goodwood, not for a flutter on the GGs, but to visit the racetrack, where a bevy of Philip's lunatic E-Type owning chums have gathered to race their Jags. And very stupidly, I've asked if I can go for a spin.
Very exciting. We've only seen 3 crashes so far. Rain's coming in, conditions are getting worse. I've signed the form with my next of kin on it, and it's all going rather worrying here.
Philip says I can be his driver's mate, reading the map and passing him boiled sweets. Philip wears a flame red tank top, I now discover, because he is the devil. His foot seems permanently glued to the floor. He drives like a man who has nothing left to live for. As he takes the corners, the shuddering steering wheel looks as if it's about to come off in his hands, and then he decides to let me in on a little secret about his beloved E-Type.
Have to be careful because one of the few weak points of an E-Type, particularly in the early days when they first came out, were the brakes and gearbox.
Now you tell me. The weak point is the brake. After I sign over the souls of my children, Philip finally agrees to drop me off in the pits. He's made his point. The E-Type does indeed go 150 miles an hour.
So that's the E-Type Jaguar, a stunning machine, beautiful to look at and a great performer. Tell you what though, no CD player.
But now I'm trading down from 4 wheels to 2. We all know what modern motorbikes look like. Sexy death-trap speed machines ridden by crazy fools who crave freedom and don't give a damn. But they didn't look so sexy when they started. They look like bicycles with lawnmowers strapped to the side, invented by Caractacus Potts. But how did the motorbike make the evolutionary leap from slow and silly to fast and cool? Our next engineering icon is the missing link. Midland's engineer and speed demon George Brough was not content with tootling around like Noddy on a bicycle come lawnmower. George wanted to invent a 2-wheeled mean machine that would fly about like the clappers and bugger the speed limit. The result was what many aficionados regard as the silver ghost of motorbikes, the Brough Superior. Now if you see one of these things in the road, you might just feel sad for the poor Wally on top who can't afford to upgrade to a Kawasaki 250. But think again. The Brough Superior is probably the most highly sought after vintage motorcycle in the world. One of them recently sold for a staggering £3 million.
In the 1920s and 30s, driving on country roads through idyllic villages like this should have been a serene and peaceful experience. There was very little traffic on the roads, and until 1930 the speed limit was only 20 miles an hour. Then, in 1925, a certain Derbyshire man called George Brough perfected a motorbike that would help change all that. The SS100 was one of the first motorbikes to do a ton. That's 100 miles an hour to you, and I've arranged to look at one. Or is it 2? Is it 3? It might be 4. Think about it. Very nice.
Yep, here we have it.
Well, I'm no petrol head, but I know that this is actually a very beautiful looking machine, compared to a lot of motorbikes you see nowadays. This is quite sleek, it's quite elegant, isn't it?
They are bespoke machines, and the owners would visit the works and discuss with George what they wanted. They would have the footrest sets of what they wanted, the handlebars.
So customised bikes, you're talking designer customised bikes.
Well, that's right. Some people wanted a mauve Bruff Superior, and they had a mauve Bruff Superior. Other people wanted them everything chromium plated or nickel plated.
Howard, would you drive a mauve Bruff Superior?
I've driven a mauve Bruff Superior.
People point at you.
It's a race.
Look at that colourblind man on that nice bike.
Perhaps the most famous owner of a Bruff Superior was the thrill-seeking Lawrence of Arabia. He actually owned 7 Bruff bikes and named each one George after its maker. Unfortunately, Lawrence met his own maker famously after a fatal accident on George VII.
The machines in the 20s, when he started to produce the Bruff Superior, had flat tanks. He introduced the saddle tank. The frame itself was very strong. That sort of contributed to the handling. Well, these again were an innovation by George Bruff. Crash bars to protect the bike in the event of a spill. Saddle, very, very comfortable, very wide. I think it would suit you, Rory, this one.
Don't know what you mean, sir.
Interconnected silencers, which were quite an innovation. And the fishtails, which became a trademark of Bruff Superiors.
Is that just a design feature, or are they functional?
It is. It mutes the sound. They were gentlemen's motorcycles, so when you're cruising, you want a nice quiet sound.
The Superior was innovative, it was stylish, and it went like the blazes. When Bruff first unveiled his SS100 at the 1924 motorcycle show in London, it created a storm. Bruff offered a signed guarantee that every machine could hit 100 miles an hour.
This particular one is the SS100 model. It will do 100 miles an hour.
So you've done 100 on this very machine?
I haven't.
Not that you can in this country, because you have to stop at 70. But if you could have gone 100 on this bike, which you didn't,
yes,
could you have done?
Well, that's right. I have done. To be honest, I haven't done 100 on this one.
You see?
I have on others, but off the road, of course.
On the pavement. And are we going to go have a spin on it?
Well, we could, but I've got one in the sidecar if you'd prefer.
Sounds even better. Now, it's one thing sitting behind the wheel of a Rolls-Royce Silver Ghost, but I'm no motorcyclist. So today I opted for the relative comfort and safety of a sidecar. Not just any old sidecar, of course, a Bruff Superior sidecar. Okay, Howard. I might ask you actually how fast you're going to go today.
We'll only do 40 or 50 miles an hour today.
Let's just enjoy the countryside.
Absolutely.
The gentle summer rain. Well, Adam, I must say it feels not only very comfortable but very safe and solid. Is that an illusion?
No, they're very safe. It's a very stout chassis. So are you a convert then?
Actually, you converted me to the sidecar, definitely. This is great. I think my feet have gone to sleep though. Designed for a mermaid, wasn't it, this? Oh, steady on, Howard.
I know, it's ticking over and going at slow speed.
For some 40-odd years, British motorbikes were generally regarded as the best in the world. Classic British makes like Bruff, Norton, BSA and Triumph dominated the scene. But by the 1960s, greasy British garages were giving way to big Japanese factories. One by one, cheaper mass-produced Japanese models pushed the British marques out of business. But the old British machines are still revered among bikers. And the most cherished of all is the Bruff Superior, the world's first modern motorbike.
Right, here we are. We're on the Bruff Club, aren't we now?
The Bruff Superior Club.
The Bruff Superior Club. In a nutshell, why is the Bruff Superior?
Use a non-English term, uniqueness, I suppose. It's special quality of build, of design.
My bike is over 80 years old. To find something that is nearly 80 years old, still a pleasure to ride, It obviously was a pleasure to ride when it was brand new all the way through the years. And pleasure is the art of motorcycling.
And you have a very distinctive helmet, don't you? I mean, you have to see me ride with this practice and the ears on.
When they invented the railway, I'm told, they worried that travelling faster than 30 miles an hour would make your brain melt and your eyes pop out. But breezing up from London to York on a 125 makes you jolly glad those early pioneers ignored the health and safety brigade. Since leaving the metropolis, I've hardly had time to read the Daily Mail and scoff a Scotch egg.
Bikes and cars are fine, but they require a certain responsibility. You have to drive them. What I love about trains is not just their size and their grandeur, but usually somebody else is driving it for you. And occasionally, like here at York, you get a wonderful station as well.
200 years ago, we Brits invented the locomotive, and so, naturally, trains occupy a special place in our hearts. We grew up wanting to drive Thomas the Tank Engine, and to climb aboard with Jenny Agutter in The Railway Children. And for those of us who love steam trains, York is a puffing mecca. It has the largest railway museum in the world.
There are over 100 locomotives in here, including a copy of the world's first passenger train, Stephenson's Rocket. But today, I'm interested in speed. This is Mallard, the world's fastest steam locomotive ever. And that's official. It says so on the side.
Mallard set the record back in 1938 when she reached 126 miles an hour, which for the time was mind-bendingly fast. It was the high point in the age of steam locomotion. The record is likely never to be beaten, and Mallard is still revered today by railway engineers as one of the greatest trains ever built. To tell me why, I'm meeting the railway historian Richard Gibbon.
Why don't you sit in the driving seat?
Oh, lovely. How do you drive this thing?
Well, this is the only one that matters. This is the throttle. This is what makes you go. So
stop.
you pull that right out
to go fast.
up in that quadrant to go faster, and you shut it down to stop. We've got a brake here. This is the steam brake, vacuum brake there, and we've got the gears here.
It was us Brits again some 300 years ago who first thought of turning steam into movement. Easy really. Light a fire, boil some water, the steam goes through a valve, pressure builds, forcing a piston to move up and down. Connect the piston via a coupling rod to some wheels and hey presto, you've got a kettle that moves. But building a non-stop intercity high-speed kettle like the Mallard poses its own special problems. First of all, it needs lots of water, and you don't want to keep stopping to fill her up.
And the fireman's job is to keep the water level here. Now, the tender holds 5,000 gallons of water, but they'd use that in 120 miles. So on a 400-mile trip, you needed to refill with water.
How can you refill the water on a non-stop journey?
Well, there is a magic thing called a scoop under this tender, and at 100 miles an hour, you lower the scoop.
You're talking about an open trough of water
by the rail. An open trough, dead level between the tracks. What you had to do was to look at how full the tender was and drop the scoop at the right place in the trough. If you dropped your scoop at the beginning of the trough, what happened is that you took 6,000 gallons of water when there was only room for 3.
I see.
And it went back over the train and in through the ventilators and doors and windows.
And they loved that in first class, didn't they?
Absolutely. That's why the first class was never next to the locomotive.
The other problem when you're trying to reach 126 miles an hour is aerodynamics. Before Mallard, trains didn't go that fast, so railway engineers didn't worry much about aerodynamics. In fact, they'd probably never heard of them. But Sir Nigel Gresley, the designer of Mallard, needed to do everything he could to increase speed, and he found inspiration in art. This was the age of Art Deco. It was Fred Astaire in the Empire State Building and ocean liners. It was sleek lines and sexy, elegant curves. Mallard was an Art Deco train. To find out just how much difference this made, I've roped in my trusty accomplice, engineering expert Claire Barrett. Having blagged our way into Cambridge University's engineering department, we've come to the Aeronautical Research Lab to have a go with their wind machines.
Maybe that's Rory.
Nice models, eh?
My Gothic train
Black,
set.
I know, yeah.
For my dodgy teenage past.
This year's colour for model trains, is it black?
Yes. Green is so lost.
It's a shame because the Flying Scotsman, which I believe that is, would have been green and yellow, wouldn't it, in the LNER livery, and the Mallard, Bugatti blue.
But we're going to have a look at the actual science bit, Rory, rather than get distracted by the train sets. The Flying Scotsman, to me, it looks like a steam train, doesn't it?
It does.
You know, it's got the chimney at the front, it's got the steam dome, it's got all its bits and pieces and cogs and connecting rods. And
It's because the boiler is naked, isn't it? And in this one, the boiler is covered with this sort of piece of metal casing, which is nice and streamlined.
And how fast did the Mallard end up going?
I think, I don't know exactly, 125.8 miles an hour.
Roughly?
Roughly. Fastest steam train ever, a record unbroken to this day.
Right, just stick it in the tunnel and see
Stick it in
what,
the tunnel, yeah.
what the smoke does to it.
Not much difference at the front, but at the back and sides it's much more turbulent.
You can really see it, can't you? And it's the turbulence that's showing that it's got more wind resistance. And the Mallard is pretty straight, really. My money's on the Mallard in a racing situation.
It speaks for itself. It does what it says on the tin.
Yeah.
Well, I think we can leave this and come back in a few hours and see who's won.
Okay.
Mallard's record-breaking run was a matter of intense national pride. It was 1938, remember, the year before we declared war on Germany. Relations with the Bosch were a bit tetchy, not least because the Hun had established a new world record with a train called, rather amusingly, the Flying Hamburger. This high-speed hamburger had managed to hit 124 miles an hour, and Sir Nigel Gresley was absolutely determined to beat it.
Now, on the day, that great day when it broke the record, who was driving?
Driver Joe Duddington
Joe Duddington.
and his fireman Tommy Bray.
Were they a team?
They were a team, they were some team.
Do we know anything about Joe Duddington, what sort of character he was?
He was the type of man who would have willingly died going fast on a steam locomotive.
right. So
And that's not recorded, that's my opinion.
Yeah,
He turned his cap back to front.
For aerodynamics.
Well, because he was a hellraiser, and
right.
he'd just go for it, and he wasn't frightened of what was ahead of him.
He certainly set a trend for wearing caps the wrong way around, doesn't he? Yeah.
They weren't supposed to be doing it. They pretended they were going to do a brake test. So all the guys who were on the train thought they were up for a brake test. And in fact, they were up for a speed record. Only the driver, fireman, and the boss.
Good, are they? They've got no speedometer in here, so when they were doing the trial, how did they know how fast they were going?
Well, the driver and fireman knew from the sound of the rail joints, the diddly-dum, 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 they knew what speed they were doing.
Not diddly-dee?
Not diddly-dee, diddly-dum.
Diddly-dum, oh I see. Diddly-dee must have been later.
At 11:46 on the morning of July the 3rd, 1938, Mallard left London. It made its way north to Barkston, then it turned round and sped back like a bat out of hell, faster than any train had ever gone before. Over a quarter of a mile, Mallard topped 126 miles an hour. It was a new world record, and it looks like it'll never be beaten.
Mallard shot into the history books going downhill with a strong wind behind her and a madman at the wheel. But surely the genius of this locomotive is its aerodynamic shape.
From something big, curvaceous and blue to big, curvaceous and red.
Now, you don't have to be an obsessive collector or made of money to travel on a British design classic. Our next masterpiece of engineering would have taken you all over London in supreme comfort for a tanner. If it ever turns up, that is.
That's the thing about design classics. You wait for one for ages and then 3 turn up. The Routemaster is the ultimate double-decker bus. A double-decker bus fit for the double-deckers. Forget the new square things with folding doors, they're horrible. Think Reg Varney leering at dollybirds out of the front. Think Cliff Richard avoiding dollybirds out of the back. Think double-decker, think Routemaster. There had of course been double-deckers before the Routemaster, but they'd been rather rickety affairs, not very fast, not very reliable, not very comfortable. Coming out of the Second World War, we needed something tough and fast and modern, something more suitable for a teeming metropolis like London.
What the city needed was a bus that would tempt people out of their cars with the promise of speed, efficiency and comfort. Public transport with a hint of luxury, perhaps. Their prayers are answered, with the Routemaster bus.
But who do you turn to design the best ever bus? Luckily, we just had a world war, so we were knee-deep in tank designers. Douglas Scott and Arthur Durrant turned from building state-of-the-art killing machines to redesigning the number 38 last stop Piccadilly via King's Cross. The pair led a team of designers and proved that if you can build a brilliant tank, you can build a brilliant bus. Independent front suspension, power steering, power brakes, and a fully automatic gearbox. These were bits of automotive engineering which were almost unheard of in those days and have only now become standard in modern vehicles. The Routemaster was lightweight but stable with a brilliant turning circle. It was fast, comfortable and amazingly reliable and durable. The only thing they forgot was a big gun turret on the top. The Routemaster bus hit London streets in 1956 and, along with policemen's helmets and Nelson's column, quickly became a symbol of the capital. It was a massive hit. Every small boy had to have a little red model Routemaster. It was given its own TV series. This is the bus we have to thank for Reg Varney and Olive and Blakey. And of course, Britain's Elvis, Cliff Richard, had to choose a Routemaster to ride across Europe, proclaiming the joys of male celibacy. One small boy, Travis Elborough, fell so in love with the Routemaster, he wrote a book about it.
Can you remember your very first meeting with the London Routemaster?
I think that my first kind of reaction to them was when I first moved to the capital and was just travelling around on them each day to get into my job in Islington. And I just kind of fell in love with them, these kind of beautiful objects.
You grew up on the south coast, I grew up in Cornwall, and I don't know if it's the same for you, but it was such an image of London, you know. It was the red Routemaster bus crossing Westminster Bridge, usually, what summed up London. What I liked about them, which I miss most, is being able to get on and get off whenever you like.
I think it's a form of transport in a way which treats you with a certain degree of dignity in a way. You know, it treats you as an adult. You know, allows you the idea that you can get off this thing when you want to.
I was on one Holloway Road on Saturday and you couldn't get off. I was stuck for about 20 minutes waiting to get to the stop and it was so irritating. And I was saying to my boy, you know, in the old days in the Routemasters, you know, we could have jumped off now and been run over by a taxi. Upstairs at the front was a big thing. If you get upstairs at the front on a double-decker bus, and you can pretend you were driving it.
But also the fact that you have the entrance at the back rather breaks up the sort of pattern of bus travel, where you don't have that kind of the cluster of the hard lads at the back.
Right, but I still used to feel a bit naughty going upstairs because that's where people went to snog or to have a fag or to throw up, all those things that people did. One very important question I must ask you, Travis, is have you got any cash? It's just that I've got nothing on. He's going to come and ask us in a minute, isn't he? So between 1959 and 1968, 2,760 buses were made for London transport. Now, one of these buses can do 700 miles a week. That means over 50 years, that's well over 1.5 million miles.
In the golden age of the Routemaster, 6,500 of the things were buzzing around Britain, carrying a mind-boggling 6 million people every weekday. For many years, Britain ran on Routemasters.
Now we've come to Norwood Garage in South London to look at one of the very last Routemasters that was in active service in London. And of course we're going to meet the god of buses.
Colin Curtis is the last surviving member of the A-team of designers and engineers who created the Routemaster. Who better to champion the world's most famous omnibus?
Now Colin, I spoke to someone earlier who described you as a living god.
Some people call me Mr. Routemaster, but I think that's going a bit too far.
Mr. Routemaster, that's great. What we users of the bus love so much, hop on, hop off. It was a joy to run along the road like this and then jump on it.
Well, I think that's an advantage, and from an operator's point of view, passengers that get on that way save time, don't they? Yeah. And again, this gap here was to meet the emergency requirements. Right. If a bus turns over, theoretically you could get out this way.
Oh, I see, of course.
Fortunately, it's almost impossible to turn one of these buses over. The Routemaster drew on advances made in technology and design in World War II. Following the example of the Spitfire, the bus was built out of aluminium, which was light and malleable, so they could give the thing its distinctive curvaceous body. Inside, the designers created a light, elegant, friendly space, making amazing use of a very small area.
We were trying to encourage them away from the cars.
So this is to entice drivers away from the car.
Yeah.
Now, these are different because it started off with leather seats, is that right?
It's got down the pillow inside, and I think it takes to your behind, but...
It does actually.
Yes. And the other thing that we may not know about, the seating used to have leather edging to it.
I remember.
That was to allow people to slide in silk stockings and all that sort of thing.
I do remember that. I never ever once snagged my silk stockings when I was a kid. No, honestly. We Routemaster fans, what we love is the fact that you work the bell with a piece of string.
Well,
you probably
yeah.
don't call it a piece of string, you've probably got a technical name for it.
Well, no, I don't think there's any technical name, but it's not just rope, it's got a steel lining inside.
Oh, posh rope.
Yes.
We love it.
Yeah.
And if you're watching Mr. Livingstone...
Oh, now, cut that out.
Do you have to be fairly fit to drive one of these things, or it's quite easy
not
to...
really, no.
So I could drive one.
I think so, yes.
Except, of course, that it would be illegal. I wonder how Cliff got away with it.
This is so exciting. It's still exciting. You don't have to be a little boy. It's great to be upstairs at the front of one of these buses. Fantastic view. I mean, you drive around London and you never see anything like that. This is the best way to see London, the upstairs at the front of a bus. And of course, the great thing is you can pretend you're driving it, which is what I always used to do, you know, driving it. In fact, you're just obscuring my wing mirror there. Thank you. Bloody pedestrians. The Rolls-Royce Silver Ghost, a car. The Mallard, a steam train. The Brough Superior, a motorbike. The Routemaster, a bus. E-Type Jaguar, a car. All very different, but they have something in common. Engineering. Let's see what Claire has to say. A mixed bunch in land transport. My favourite, the Routemaster bus.
I like the Routemaster as well. It's fantastic engineering behind that and design. But
it's timeless, the Routemaster. You see, you don't think that's an old bus or a new bus. That is just the bus. It's the busiest of buses. It is the unit of busdom.
But what about Mallard?
Mallard, it's a steam train. It's a steam train that's pretending not to be a steam train, isn't it? By having that nice smooth front, and it's painted lovely Bugatti.
Beautiful. Unlike the Brough Superior, which is more of a chugger.
I think you have to be a motorbike enthusiast to appreciate how good that is compared to any other motorbike.
Yeah. Rolls-Royce?
Rolls-Royce looks beautiful. It's very, very ungainly to drive. It really is a big lump.
That's horrible. But it's not a driver's car. That's not what it's for. It's a chauffeur-driven car, isn't it? Jaguar? Would you kick it out the garage?
Yeah. It looks nice, and it's iconic. The shape is iconic. You think, E-Type Jaguar.
They did get it right, though. The styling and the engine altogether.
The dual overhead camshafts? Or whatever
Bring them on.
No Routemaster for me.
The Mallard for me, the engineering as well.
Out of all of them?
Yeah. Routemaster, almost, but Mallard. That steam train streaking through the countryside, that's just a bigger symbol of England.
Routemaster for me.
Steam train.